This Future Construct podcast episode is supported by Applied Software. Applied Software is on a mission to transform industry by empowering their clients and championing innovation with real-world expert consultants. So visit asti.com, it's ASTI.com, and please let them know that we here at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special series of the Future Construct podcast in partnership with Shadow Ventures. I am Amy Peck, your co-host, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, KP Reddy from Shadow Ventures. Hi, KP.
Hey, Amy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? So can you share with us why we're here and what we're doing? I have been briefed. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. So we've got these fantastic startups in our incubator and our ecosystem that we think are transforming construction and the built environment. And that would be a great way to kind of get the word out and also kind of help people understand the trends. And we've also asked our startups to bring kind of a guest with them. And so we're not just getting the startup's point of view, but also kind of macro industry points of view about what's going on.
Excellent. And so our guest today is Jamie Fleming, and I'd love to just hear how you two got connected and then introduce Altoura.
Yeah, so Jamie and I met, I think, through mutual, investors. That the industry is big, but the ecosystem is small. So we got introduced, and myself and our CTO got pretty fascinated with the strategy around what Jamie was doing at Altoura. As you know, VR, AR, it's not quote unquote new, but if you look at it in terms of the biggest opportunity in the industry is that people can't actually read drawings. People can't actually they don't actually understand what they're building and what they're managing. And the largest purchase you will make sight unseen is a building. And so we think that we got intrigued with what Altoura and Jamie is doing is this idea of the no code aspect of creating an AR VR experience.
Yeah, thanks, KP. And Amy, I was actually looking back after you asked in our previous conversation, looking back at HubSpot, all roads do lead back to Sala Paulos, because Sala was the one, Sala's at Microsoft, works with Marcus, and Sala sits on our customer advisory board. And it was through Sala that we were introduced to KP and Shadow Ventures. So truly, all roads lead back to Sala.
Oh, good. We're very close with Sala here, and she's been a champion of Future Construct.
Well, thanks for that intro, KP. It's great to find, of course, like-minded people who believe in the power of how these kind of 3D models and this notion of metaverse can transform the built and unbuilt environment. And we have a strong thesis and belief that just as over the last 20 years, the world has become more and more digitized. If you think, put yourself even 15 years ago, could you have imagined that basically anything that you wanted to buy in the world, you could access digitally online and see an image of it? Everything is becoming digitized. And that same transformation is happening right now, particularly in the enterprise, where people we're able to leverage the 3D models of environments or equipment and allow enterprises to do work in or on those models as a spatial reality, instead of just, as KP was mentioning, instead of just trying to understand a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface. And God forbid that's paper, but also just on your screen, seeing lines on a two-dimensional screen and trying to understand what you're looking at. So there's just a tremendous opportunity there in allowing enterprise customers to figure out how they want to leverage the power of that 3D model to do their work.
So could we dial back a little bit to the beginning of the story, because you were telling us a little bit about your history and the other company that you founded, and then founded Altoura in 2019. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So my background is I have an undergraduate degree in business, but then I went and got a master's in architecture for the University of Washington and worked as an architect for a number of years. And was fortunate to, in my personal journey, to be introduced to BIM right as the concept of BIM was just kind of emerging back in the early 2000s, and really got into 3D modeling and started teaching 3D modeling at the University of Washington as an adjunct. And I realized there was an interesting opportunity to form a company that was just focused on these 3D models and how to leverage 3D models. Back then, the real power outside of just trying to figure out how to dimensionally codify a design was the visualization that you could produce out of this 3D model. So we initially were focused on helping architects and designers just understand visually what their designs were. So before they showed them to their client, they were like, oh crap, is this really what we're trying to sell them? And ran that company for a number of years and literally built tens of thousands of 3D models of all different sorts of things, but primarily focused on architects and building developers. And then in the late 2000s, we were actually approached by Microsoft, who is kind of in our backyard. I'm based in Seattle, Washington. And they had identified my company as one of the top 3D modeling companies that they had encountered, and said, hey, we've got a special device that we're working on putting together, and we are interested in having companies come in and build experiences on this device that turned out to be the HoloLens 1. But we don't want you to just come in and build something in a vacuum, similar to how you guys are running this podcast. We actually want you to bring a customer with you that has a real need for this concept of mixed reality, which is Microsoft's term of kind of the metaverse. And so we brought Skanska in as a customer, and in that engagement, we built the world's first mixed reality leasing center for a tower in downtown Seattle called 2&U that's located on 2nd University. And so the concept was brokers would put a HoloLens 1 on their potential tenant, and they could take a virtual tour of the building and walk through it as if they were actually there, and they could spatially move through the space and check out the building. And so that was really successful, and kind of that's where light bulbs started to spark for us of like, oh wow, there's a lot of interesting opportunity to leverage these 3D models for different uses.
Yeah, so, and I definitely want to talk about the journey of raising capital, because for founders, it's kind of nightmarish, let's be honest. And for investors listening to pitch after pitch after pitch, I work with startups on pitches. There are some god-awful pitches out there. I don't know how everybody just manages to take a step forward and money gets exchanged and companies get built sometimes when you look at the process. But it happened for you, and KP has invested in a lot of great companies. So he does invest, and you've raised capital. Can you talk a little bit about that process, and what was that kind of synergistic moment? Because it's really important to choose the right VC as well as raising the capital.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. Well, I believe all things in life, like everything requires a pinch of kind of fairy dust, or a pinch of good luck with every successful endeavor. But I was really fortunate to meet my current CTO, who had been working at Microsoft developing the operating system for the HoloLens. His name is Bharat Ahluwalia, and Bharat had a lot more experience than I did in working for SaaS companies and big enterprise companies. I'd been running a services company, a successful services company, but very services oriented, that has very little bearing on a product or a SaaS company. So thankfully, Bharat came with an entourage of connections that helped us kind of get that first angel investment, where really they were investing in the team. And frankly, they were investing in Bharat because they knew he was very technically oriented and had a lot of great experience, and very, very smart individual. And so these angels were basically like, look, Bharat's validating Jamie. Jamie's got some experience running a services business. Let's throw a little cash at this and see what happens. Like, it would be a fun pet project. And thankfully, because we had worked so closely with Microsoft pretty early on, something that distinguished Altoura from a lot of other startups out there is we had real customers that were using the product and giving us feedback on our product. And you're going to hear from Marcus later on your show, but we took a very specific philosophy at Altoura of we're only going to build features that customers ask for. We're never going to go into our basement or our garage and say, wouldn't it be cool if we built this? People would love this. There were no shortage of those ideas, but we tried to be disciplined of saying we're not going to build it unless someone's paying us good hard cash to build that feature, because obviously then they can use it, and hopefully another customer will have a similar need and say, oh yeah, that's cool, we can use that. And I think that's one thing that helped us separate as we were pitching to VCs, is we could tie back to customer stories of, hey, this is how our product is providing value for the customer because they've paid for us to build this and they're using it.
Yeah, it seems fairly obvious to listen to your customer, but we come across, and I'm sure KP can share some stories as well, companies where they've been doing exactly that. It's the smartest engineering minds are just ferreting away by themselves, building something that they think is amazing and have never spoken to a customer. So it does, as obvious as it seems, it's not the way everything happens. And it is hard when you're building a company to try and assess what the full market landscape is, unless you really have some key customers. And it sounds like Microsoft was very helpful in that journey.
Absolutely. No, I think a lot of founders get stuck in this chicken and egg problem. Like, you'll say, well, how can I sell something to the customer if I don't have an idea, I don't have anything to sell? Like how, of course I've got to dream up and build something and then see if the customer wants it. But really, it's in the beginning. I don't know if I should be saying this publicly or not. There is a little bit of, you're selling a vision essentially to the customer, and you're saying, hey, if we can deliver this for you, can you use this? Or, tell us how you would use this. And then they're saying, yeah, I think we'll buy that. And then you're like, okay, let's go quick. We got to build this thing. Now we got to deliver this thing to the customer. So there is a little bit of, I don't know which one goes first, that maybe that's the chicken and then you're quickly building your egg. But yes, I think that is I'm sure there are genius founders out there, or maybe just incredibly lucky founders out there that do have an idea and then they introduce it to the market and it takes off like wildfire. But I think the safer route is to focus on just building things that customers are asking for and willing to pay for.
That people need. Yeah. And I think the reality is that, when people sit down and they're thinking about their product, we all know, we all have friendlies who are high up at certain companies or who are potential customers. And, I use the term friendlies. Other people have different terminology, but people who are close enough where you could say, look, we want to do this exactly to your point. And I think that's incredibly good advice. And so KP, I'm going to come to you and say, well, so what was your first impression when you met Jamie and team?
Well, I think one of the things that we struggle with a little bit is, and you were talking about, pitches and all that. We're a little bit like anti-pitch. If your pitch is so polished, all we do is get suspicious. And so,
someone like me.
Yeah, it's like there's so many founders that are like all sizzle, no steak, right? They're just great at pitching. They can get on a stage, and those are the ones that we think are like shysters. Like they must not have anything because they're working so hard to be so charismatic and so impressive. So we actually refrain from pitches. We can just kind of say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it, right? And I think what's unique about our industry is that it's very hard to like just show up out of college and build a startup in our industry. You have to have had the industry experience. You have to understand the industry nuances. And then there's a little bit of this industry is a little bit of like, well, who do you know game? Right? Like, oh, do you know so-and-so over at Skanska? Oh, do you know so-and-so over at Gensel? Like there's that game. It's almost impossible from someone outside the industry to play. So we want to understand kind of the foundational experience and knowledge of the team and where they've been. What's interesting is around this idea of like first customers, our thesis is that first customers are easy in a way, right? It takes some, and I'll talk a little bit about what Jamie was talking about, but first customers are easy. It's the how did you get it, and how are you going to scale? So we I have this saying like, as a founder, the first thing you do is you sell your friends and family. But that doesn't mean as much until you hire a stranger to sell strangers, because you're going to go from selling friends and family, and then you're going to go sell a stranger, and then you're going to hire a stranger to sell strangers. That's when scale and that's when magic happens. And we want to understand, like, what is it going to take to hire a stranger to go sell strangers? Because I mean, I can sell you stuff, right? I can sell you some stuff. You're like, oh, sure, KP, I'll buy stuff from you. And well, it's like, whatever. That doesn't mean as much as someone cold calling you and selling you, right? And so that's one
good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. And so I think, the thing that Jamie was talking about is like, in the middle of like overhearing the Theranos verdicts and all of the fake it till you make it extremes. I do think the right customer or prospect, if you're building something that is not what is today, but what is the future, what is their choice? Their choice is to either bet on you as a resource to go figure it out, or bet on an internal resource that maybe isn't quite as inventive. So they're saying, okay, we want to go execute on this grand vision. Should we partner with a startup that is inventive, that is risk averse, all those things, that is more risk oriented? Or am I going to pull in a product manager from my massive business that's probably working 38 hours a week and has 6 weeks of PTO and whatever, that's not that motivated, but not that inventive? Am I going to bet on that resource? So I think the right customer understands like that they're betting on a vision and a future, and they're okay with failure.
Yeah. So both of you kind of mentioned this kind of magic fairy dust, or this sort of combination, are there, and I know there's no formula, but there is a visionary component to being a founder, to being in technology. I mean, it's just, we have a certain company to thank for, the metaverse now being on everybody's, lips. But, the reality is this technology has been around for decades. And it does take some vision to harness it. It takes even more vision to sell it. So what is that? Is there a balance between sort of the practical and the visionary? I'm going to start with you, KP, that you look for, and with you, Jamie, that's like just part of your sort of day-to-day.
Yeah, I think the way we look at vision is, what are the near-term things you can execute on, on your vision, and what is the bigger, if everything goes well, what does it start to look like? And I think to your point, a lot of this technology has been around for a while, but if you look at our industry specifically, the cultural aspect, taking a superintendent who's 70 years old and throwing a headset on them, good luck with that, right? Good luck with them, because they might feel like they look stupid or whatever, right? But I think what you start to see is that, the people that are now running the industry had an email address and a computer day one on the job. They didn't actually go through this, I have to go from writing things down to using a computer. They started day one at their job with a computer, with an email address. So I think that the cultural shifting of like the why now is that people are willing to put something on their head. They're willing to carry an iPad around. I remember with the first version of the iPad, I was out with the CEO of a construction company, and he had just bought it. And he's like, I'm returning it. It's just a very expensive piece of glass.
Well, he's not wrong.
So yeah, there's that, right? So I think that stuff is shifting, right? That is shifting in a big way.
And and Jamie, once you get into the day-to-day of building a company, and I don't have to tell you this, sometimes it's hard to really sit back and kind of just give yourself the space to look at the bigger picture. So what's your kind of visionary, your big vision, for Altoura moving forward? I think we certainly understand the day-to-day, and the utility today is very clear.
Yeah, I love that question. It's a mix of kind of riffing on what KP is saying about, what's in the here and now and what's the future. I think that we definitely are big believers in this concept of the metaverse, not in the kind of dark, shadowy, kind of harrowing vision of the metaverse but really this concept that the digital world can provide us more and more value. And our belief is that, most of the world, the enterprises out there rely on their physical products or environments in order to be productive. These are called the frontline or the first line workers, and there are more of them than information workers today. And so, the ability to capture physicality and digitize it and make it spatial, and then provide tools for different workflows, we feel like that is absolutely the inevitable trend. And so we're building for the inevitable, not for the hopeful. And we believe that these digital assets will become as valuable or potentially even more valuable than physical assets in the future, because you can make them ubiquitous, you can run workloads on them, you can tease data out of them, you can do all these sorts of things that the physical world is limiting in a lot of ways. So you see this emergence with NFTs and other things already just starting to scratch the surface of this. But imagine instead of just a gorilla with a mustache and a cigar, it's a digital representation, a digital equivalent of your IP or your asset that you've got. And so there is a huge, we're at the tip. I don't even think we can see the tip of the mountains yet of what lies ahead of us in terms of the opportunity of metaverse and enterprise. And just circling long-winded back, feel free to edit any of this out. But I think there are people today focused on, wouldn't it be awesome to have a Zoom meeting in the metaverse instead of like what we're doing right now? And I would say, maybe. I mean, that could be cool. Maybe that reduces fatigue. I don't know. It still is pretty compelling for me to see a video of you where I can see your facial expressions, and we're not doing all these other gymnastics. But what I love about where we are as a company is we are solving problems that have a business value today. We're not focused on necessarily a future vision of something that needs to happen, in order for it to provide value. And I'm not saying that won't, just having a pure spatial meeting with avatars for a social event won't one day have value. It may. But what I love right now is being able to show and track ROI and value for customers on their assets today, offloading workflows onto these digital assets. That's really exciting to me, because there's just, again, it's just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do.
Yeah. And if those virtual meetings happen, you'll be ready. You'll have the 3D assets
exactly.
to import to be able to work with. All right, we're going to bring Marcus Farquhar on from Microsoft in just a moment. But before we do that, Jamie, I have a question that I ask everyone on the show. And if you could project yourself 20, 25 years in the future, and you could bring any product or service with you that would just make you personally happy or just make your life better in some way, it does not have to be based in reality, it could be cloak of invisibility, whatever. What would it be and what would it do?
Oh my goodness. I should have been listening to more of your podcast so I could prep for a question like this.
Right out of left field.
Yeah, well, probably have something to do. I'm a big coffee nut, espresso nut. So it's going to have something to do with a better espresso machine that maybe, I don't know, maybe you can, boy, I'm going to just completely falter on this because I already love my espresso setup. I can't
But it's in your
even,
personal robot could be actually just making it for you.
That's true. Although part of I'm all about the labor. I enjoy the process of like making or doing. So that's kind of also kind of cathartic to do that. Maybe it's incorporating kind of yoga into pulling espresso. Maybe there would be a
there you go.
app for that where you could stretch as you're pulling your shot and part of your meditation.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Yogachino.
Yogachino. Yeah, you've already branded it, right?
All right, so we have been talking a lot about Microsoft. Let's see if any of it's really true. We're going to bring on Marcus. Marcus, can you join us?
Hi, hello.
Hi. Jamie, we're going to say goodbye to you.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining us. And
yeah, thanks for having me. Marcus, keep it clean.
We'll try. We'll try.
Now we're just going to see. We're going to do some fact checking now.
Exactly. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.
Take care. Bye.
Well, welcome, Marcus. And could you just give us a little bit more of an intro into your role at Microsoft?
Yeah. So I'll hark back to a previous podcast, but I am a close colleague of Sala Eckhart's at the Microsoft Center of Innovation, but I am the experimentation lead. So my role is to validate the return on investment of various innovative technologies and apply them to Microsoft's real estate portfolio. So my program that I manage is rather broad, but one pillar of our program is in XR or mixed reality.
And then how did you and Jamie meet?
That's kind of I don't know, that was kind of an odd introduction. But I am rather new to Microsoft. My background is very broad in terms of the digital building lifecycle as a concept. I've kind of worked in every sector now, and I've kind of gone the full gamut and ended up in the kind of owner operator segment. But my background is as a design engineer. I've worked for very large construction contractors and in the inspection maintenance space, applying innovative technologies in all of those spaces, and now here as an owner operator. And coming on board to Microsoft, XR and MR is a frequent tool I've used in each of those various sectors of the digital building lifecycle. So when I came on board, they were looking kind of for a partner in Microsoft to kind of further along Altoura being used at Microsoft. And so with my name coming up, they kind of introduced me to Altoura and said, you too like mixed reality, go apply it, please. And so I came along, that was about January, February, I believe, of 2021 is when we got introduced kind of internally at Microsoft. And so we've taken what Altoura has done at Microsoft previously and then developed it over this year.
And, it seems so obvious, but of course we are in the industry, and I think we forget that we're kind of in a bubble relative to technology and what its capabilities are. But when you talk about kind of building lifecycle management, I mean, XR, MR has significant impact in every stage of that life cycle. And what are some of the ways that you think, in addition to Altoura, that owner operators, and is it going to be on owner operators to really enact this change and to start leveraging the power of this technology at every stage? Because we're finding that they're typically kind of solving one problem with one technology, right? And not really thinking about how do we seamlessly take this technology and apply it across this life cycle.
Yeah, that's a nuanced question there. And I think it depends on the owner, but you are correct that a more kind of holistic overarching strategy. So we don't have this like fragmentation, like this mixed reality tool out of my tool bag goes to this, and this one goes to this, and they're completely different. Depending, because from an owner operator's perspective, we want that continuity through the process from a data loss standpoint, from a value loss standpoint. So you are correct, but I would just, from my perspective and our perspective at the Center of Innovation, yes, we are kind of defining that strategy and what that kind of holistically looks like, and how we don't have data loss from step to step, from my design to construction all the way through. How do we maintain our 3D models and assets well enough that really any mixed reality app could be used to access that data?
And do you feel, when you, oh, sorry, go ahead, KP.
I was gonna say, I think it's always interesting because owners like Microsoft that have a lot of resources, a lot of experience, are leveraging tools that a smaller owner would actually benefit from a lot, that doesn't have all the resources and doesn't have, especially in this day and age. But it's just like a cultural thing. They don't know. And I think about the whole process of someone thinks about, we all think in 3D, and then we draw it in 2D to try to communicate a 3D idea. It's like this cycling of kind of information from brain to paper to the computer kind of thing. And, what do you think it takes, because you've had experience beyond Microsoft, to get people to understand? I saw it in BIM. They're like, oh, we're too small to use BIM. I'm like, that's exactly why you should use it. What do you think that click is going to have to be for smaller owners and operators to realize this technology it's actually more applicable to them than maybe a larger owner?
I kind of break that down into 3 points. The first is price point. I think that the price point, your starting price point to get everyone, headsets, or to get everyone trained on BIM, that's a high initial cost. So educating companies on that initial cost does have future benefits, and that future benefit is the second point, moving quickly. So, right, these technologies really allow us to move more quickly and more effectively because our information is more accurate. And I think that kind of investment curve, high initial costs and then benefits later on, that's difficult to communicate because it is a completely new alien concept to a lot of people. So basically, the way that we pursue that internally is getting hands-on. I'm a very hands-on learner, getting people actually in the field, using these tools, getting engaged in the process, and really touching and feeling the experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think also, just from a sales standpoint, sales isn't focused on smaller companies. I mean, if you look at, even mid-market to a degree, it's like if you're even Microsoft or you're a smaller company and you have limited sales resources, you're going to go after the Skanskas of this world and the Microsofts of this world, and some of the bigger companies. So I think it's also, it seems that the process needs to be not just about standards in the traditional sense, but sort of a standardization of process and workflow, where it's sort of de rigueur to have a digital twin of your building. And I think we're moving towards that, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And I'd be curious to see what you think some of the steps are, to help us get there, where it just makes total sense that you would always have a digital twin of your building from an as-built perspective.
So we are building those value use cases currently in terms of what are our key owner operator scenarios, things like better tracking our energy usage. How do we measure that in terms of dollars saved per business group, per building? That also kind of breaks down into decades. Is my building built in the 1980s or is it built in 2010? Meaning, how do you retroactively build your digital twin for older buildings and the new ones? So that is a very big subject. But I will say that defining the, in your total digital building lifecycle, at the very end, you have what's known, as a digital twin, the thing that the owner operator can use for the life cycle of the building over 30, 40 years. What are the value proof points of that? Easy ones are energy, thermal, electric, facade, roof inspections, things like that are fairly easy to define, meaning I don't have to send a roof inspection crew on my roof anymore. I can have sensors up there, vibration sensors on each chiller, and I can actually do projections, meaning I can simulate the vibration frequency of that roof chiller and understand that once it gets shakier, a certain point of shakiness, it's going to break next year, right? So you can start to do that. And that type of proactive simulation is really where digital twins have its power. But defining each proof point is a big venture. It's a big matrix conversation. I think in terms of, we can talk specifically about mixed reality and digital twins, if that's where you're going with this.
Well, yeah, I think that is another, essentially it gives you X-ray vision, right? I mean, we see the movies in the 70s where you'd put on the glasses and you could see through walls. Well, it's here.
Mm-hmm. And that is, in terms of mixed reality for an owner operator, we're using either mobile devices or headsets, but that is a concept we're exploring, especially with all of our new building developments that we have. We have a very big pipeline of new campuses that Microsoft is building. Once those are completed, we will have that rich BIM data set to be able to have that experience in mixed reality.
I feel like we're so close. We're so close.
I
But I
think
think it's going to take a while.
no, I think we are. I mean, I think it's just interesting. I get back to the biggest purchase you make, sight unseen, with very little performance. I mean, if you went into a dealership and they say, well, we're going to sell you a car, can't tell you what it's going to look like, can't tell you what the maintenance costs are going to be.
Can't drive it.
Can't drive it, but give me your money, right? And I think that's the gap when we talk about mixed reality of just the buyer and the users. I mean, I used to do a lot of work in healthcare, and you'd finish the building and then there would be a remodel within a year because the doctors and the nurses and the practitioners weren't engaged as users of the asset. So they had to tweak it. And so there was like the first build, and then there was the renovation a year later because they weren't involved in the process because they don't spend their time looking at drawings. They don't know what to look at versus like throw this headset on and, go walk through the new building and tell us what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to the relationship with Altoura there, where I will specifically focus on Redmond East Campus because I am located in the Seattle area, and that's kind of our main test bed, especially for Altoura. Communicating to our stakeholders and really getting a larger audience involved in the design and construction project process that really traditionally haven't been included, but for that very reason, where we want to kind of onboard our stakeholders into our built environment before it's even physically real. And we kind of break that down into 4 themes. So we're trying to communicate Microsoft's mission, which is every one of our buildings will be the most connected, accessible, sustainable, and protected assets. And so that's kind of how we break down Altoura's story and application and how our stakeholders use that. So communicating our maintenance costs beforehand so that they can kind of absorb that and think about it and give us that feedback.
It sounds like you're actually kind of creating a lot of the business models yourself. And I think that is another key where, especially now in this kind of period of transition, which, could take, at least a decade really before we start to see, every building have a digital twin before this technology becomes much more ubiquitous. But do you feel like just almost handing owner operators the business model and the tools that they need? And, Altoura is a no-code environment, so they don't have to worry about engineers. I mean, what are some of these like boxes that you're checking to really help propel the technology? You've spoken about a few.
Yeah. So the no-code environment of Altoura, as well as integrations we're making with our other business groups is a very powerful partnership in terms of making it the ease of accessibility, of those digital twins easier. The business models, I think, depends. So the stance of each owner operator, I think, will depend. How many buildings they have, how involved they want to be. Specifically, what we're looking at in terms of strategy is, the owner operator owning that data, because we're the central hub. At the end of the day, we own the building, we should own the data. Where that's centrally housed, how we access that, how each business group access that central data model from a headset, those are things we're trying to tweak out because every region's different, especially across country, if you expand that, argument, that macro. So I don't have an easy answer for you for that, but we are exploring that and trying to like define that guideline in terms of how we want to receive BIM, how digital twins are formulated, kept, housed, maintained, and then how our business groups access them for what value use cases. That is a developing subject, and we could dive into a specific example, but that's how we look at that.
And I bet somewhere in that example is a little product called Azure, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today.
Possibly.
Maybe. I mean, just maybe.
Maybe.
Well, so I'm also going to give you the question that I give to everybody else. But before I do, KP, do you have anything else for Marcus?
No, I think this was fantastic. I really do think it's important. There's a shift where companies like Microsoft are really leading the charge, where as little as like 5 years ago, they were deferring to their architects and contractors and third-party managers and saying, hey, we don't do buildings, we do software. Don't go figure it out. And I think it's great that they're taking the time and energy to really own the process, because owners write the check, but they don't care to own the process. And I think it sets a good tone in terms of leadership to other companies when owners do care about the process and they're not afraid to dictate process, which has been in the past. There's a lot of fear for owners to dictate process. Yeah,
it is a slight shift, but the value perceived, in the digital building lifecycle, having the owner's input throughout that whole cycle, we believe that a lot of costs can be saved in terms of total lifecycle costs, and calculating those specifically, per segment, design, construction, maintenance, and ownership, is a large initiative of ours. And it is perceived that, having owners kind of dictate that can be very valuable, because at the end of the day, we're the user. So if we're not happy with it, like what you just said, we have to retrofit a year later, which is a massive cost that we could have avoided.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to take our little trip to the future now. So 20, 25 years. And if you could bring with you any product or service that would just make you personally happy or make your life better, again, does not have to be based in reality. What would it be and what would it do?
All righty. So I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm very snow centric. I used to be a ski instructor and disability ski instructor. So skiing is my sport of choice. So with the 9 inches of snow that I have outside my house right now, I'll use that as my theme. I don't know if it'll be caught in the video, but I definitely had to apply concealer this morning. So on the bruises on my face, hence that sport. So in that regard, there's a really cool product that came out previously that I don't think really took off, but there's mixed reality, like snow sport goggles that I thought was very fascinating. And that could be translated to cycling or mountain biking or really any sort of sport there. And what I would really like to see and use, and I think their LiDAR technology needs to increase far beyond what it is now, but I'd like to see a corollary between video games, like for kids, and simulating that video game on the actual mountain skiing. There was a group that started doing this, but I don't think the technology was quite there yet. But I really like the idea of having, like the Nintendo Switch, you have accelerometers on your body and you're simulating the movements of that sport. Having that experience, but then having the same experience in your living room in real life. And this has corollaries to simulations in construction. So that's kind of where the idea stems from. But in terms of personally, I'd like to see like a mixed reality sports goggle that is also tied into gaming systems, if that makes sense.
Wow. Because skiing's not hard enough. You have to be playing a game. You must be a really, really good skier if you want to be playing a game while you're skiing.
I don't know. I just thought it was a nifty idea. Maybe I'll let others be the judge of my ability. No, I forgot the company's name, but they had like a call and text feature, and you could cast what you were seeing in a video call to someone else while you were moving. Wow. So you could like share, hey, I found this cool boulder, whatever it was, right? This cool scenery. You could share it live. It interesting company. I forgot the name, but
very
I
cool.
don't know if the active LiDAR that used to map the terrain to place the 3D objects, I don't know if it was mature enough yet, but
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Well, we will have at some point, a true digital twin of the planet. It's like everybody's working on having that, so we will know where the trees are.
Mhm.
Hopefully, and they're going to crackpot CEOs that are actually going to now take their board meetings, and project that into the board meeting while they're. So I love it. I think that's a great idea.
Because you could, with the advances in 3D reality capture, you could, right, in your living room, in your video game environment, you could be skiing or cycling or mountain biking, the actual mountain that was scanned, in that video game, but then have that same game physically there.
That's
so
very cool. I like it. I'm gonna actually build the insurance company for that.
Yeah, give me a call later.
Very busy. Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And KP, this was fun. We should do more of these.
We should. That'd be a great idea.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
All
thank you.
right. Thanks.